Here's your notes for section 9.4, solving quadratics by completing the square. Our essential question today is going to be, how can I solve quadratics? I'll do that, quadratic equations by completing the square. Okay, so to do a real quick review, when we see a problem that looks like this right here, oops, I'll give you a second to copy that. Remember, you can pause this at any time as you're watching. So a quick review here. How can I solve this first equation right here using any method? And right now what I see the method that I should be using is solving by undoing. So I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of both sides here. And when I do that, I get on the left-hand side x plus 6. I'm going to take out this parentheses here. Just get x plus 6. And on the right-hand side, since I can't take the square root of 8, it's just going to be plus or minus square root of 8. My ultimate goal here is to get the x by itself, so I'm going to now subtract 6 from both sides. So my final answer, the best way I can write it, is negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 8. If you wanted to make that as a decimal, you can. Remember, we split that up into two problems, negative 6 plus the square root of 8 on your calculator, and negative 6 minus the square root of 8 on your calculator. You don't have to do that, though. Remember, this answer right here, oh gosh, that doesn't look very good. This answer right here is sufficient enough for us. It's actually the best answer. So today we're going to kind of use that piece of knowledge, that solving by undoing, and we're going to do something that's called completing the square. So let me move my paper up here. So to complete the square, I'm going to give you some steps. So step one is to move the constant term to the other side of the equation. Okay, so we're going to first move that constant term to the other side. So I see a minus 3 there. That's my constant term. It's the one without an x. I'm going to add 3 to both sides. And I want you to watch how I write this. I'm going to write this a little bit different. So I'm going to say x squared plus 10x plus something equals 3, because 0 plus 3 is 3, plus something. All right, so our next step here, this is where we're going to complete the square. When we complete the square, we're going to turn it into an equation that has something squared equals something on the right-hand side. So now if you go back up to the example, it's going to look just like that in the end. In order to figure out what we put in this parentheses, I'm going to put a little side note over here. We're going to take the b value and divide it by 2. So that b value is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So this in the parentheses becomes x plus 5. Now I have those blanks there for a reason, because we're completing the square. And when I complete the square, my other little side note here is going to be this b over 2. Whatever we get, we're going to have to square that and fill it into those blanks. So we got 5, so 5 squared is 25. Now to get the right-hand side, I'm going to add up my 3 and plus 25. I get 28. So step 2 was to find the b over 2 value, fill in parentheses squared, and blanks. I'm going to add blanks with the b over 2 value squared. Okay? Now, if I'm looking at this equation that we have right here that we just came up with, it looks just like the example that we just had up at the beginning of the class, solving by undoing. So we're going to solve this equation now by undoing. So I'm going to take the square root. I don't want yellow. Go back to red. We're going to take the square root of x plus 5 squared. We're also going to take that square root of 28. So I get x plus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 28. Again, solving for x, we got to isolate that x, so I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. My final best answer is going to be x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 28. Again, I'm good with that answer right there. If you felt like getting the decimals, go ahead and do that, but this is the most exact answer that you can get. All right, I'm going to take a look here. I'm just going to go over just a few more little examples here. If I give you x squared plus 20x plus something, what would I do to complete that square? So I'm going to fill in this parentheses here. So half of that 20 is 10, so this becomes x plus 10. 10 squared then would be that 100 value there. A couple more examples just to kind of get some practice here. I've got x squared minus 32x plus something. So in order to complete this square, I'm going to take half of that negative 32. Half of negative 32 is 16, so this becomes x minus 16 squared. And then 16 times 16 is 256. One last little example in case you're still trying to figure this out. Let's go x squared plus 12x plus what? In order to complete this square, this would become x plus half of 12 then is 6. 6 times 6 is 36. So there's just a few more examples for you. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next page here. Did I complete that last step? I didn't. So step 3 is to solve by undoing. Okay. Going back. Okay. So now, all right. So some more examples for us. We're going to follow our steps. Let me check back. Let's go on to those next two examples here. We're going to solve this by completing the square. My first step is to get that constant term to the other side. So my first step here would be to add 10 to both sides. So rewriting this, x squared minus 6x. I'm going to rewrite it, remember, with those blanks. 0 plus 10 is 10, plus that blank. Right away when I do that, I know I'm turning this into something squared. In order to figure out what goes in those parentheses for that squared term, I'm going to take half of that negative 6, which is that b value here. Half of negative 6 is 3, so this becomes x minus 3. In order to fill in those blanks now, negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. And then 9 goes in on both of those blanks. 10 plus 9 then is 19. So that's my second step. I completed that square. This was step 1, this was step 2. Now I'm going on to step 3. I'm going to solve by undoing. Take the square root of x minus 3 squared. Take the square root of 19. This becomes x minus 3 equals, square root of 19 is not a nice number, so it's just going to be plus or minus the square root of 19. Get that x by itself. I'm going to add 3 to both sides. Best way to write this answer is x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 19. All right. One last example here. Don't be afraid of the decimal. It's okay. Our first step then is to move that constant term to 2.25 to the other side. Rewrite this, x squared plus 4x plus something equals 2.25 plus something. Figuring out that completing the square, half of the b value is 2, so this becomes x plus 2. 2 squared is 4. 4 goes into both of my blanks. Adding up on that right-hand side, 2.25 plus 4 is 6.25. Now I'm at step 3. I can solve by undoing. Square root both sides. So I'm going to take the square root of x plus 2 squared. Take the square root of 6.25. Square root of x plus 2 squared is just that x plus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 6.25. 6.25 is not a perfect square. Subtract 2 from both sides. Rewrite your answer in the best mathematical way. Negative 2 plus or minus square root of 6.25. So completing the square works with any quadratic equation that you have. So again, we can do this instead of factoring. You can always solve by undoing. So you've got a couple of different ways now to write that. Go ahead and write your summaries for this. Remember, you can always use your summaries on your exams at the end. You might want to include some steps in your summaries. I'll give you one more example here. I'll show you one that's factorable and then how we can solve it in case you want just a little bit more. So I'm going to write x squared plus 7x plus 12 equals 0. So I know this is factorable. This factors into x minus 3 and, x plus 3 and x plus 4. I know that the factors of 12 that add up to 7 are 4 and 3. So you could factor it that way. In case you like completing the square, I'm going to show you that. No, I'm not, because that's a decimal, and I don't think you want to do that. So let's change this. Let's see. Let's make this 8x. Let me erase this here. Nope, not the highlighter. Erase. Okay, so I'm going to erase this, make this 8x. So now changes it just a little bit. This instead of 4, oh, why isn't that erasing? 4 and 3. This becomes 6 and 2, so my factors are x plus 6 and x plus 2. I know my solutions then, real quickly, are x is equal to negative 6 and x is equal to negative 2. So let's say we wanted to do this by completing the square. My first step would be to move that 12 to the other side. Give myself this blank. So I'm going to add 12. Now in order to figure out completing the square, half of 8 is 4. So this becomes x plus 4 squared. 4 times 4 is 16. This equals 28. Sorry, this is subtracting 12. Let's see if I can erase this now. Not quite sure. There we go. So this would be minus 12. I apologize for that. Subtract 12. So then we got over here. I'm not quite sure what's happening with my eraser. Negative 12 plus 16 is 4. Square root both sides then. So solving by undoing. X plus 4 squared, square root of 4. I know the square root of 4 is 2, so it's going to be plus or minus 2. And that just ends up being x plus 4. Solving my two different equations now. X plus 4 equals a positive 2. Subtract 4. X equals negative 2, which matches right there. And then x plus 4 equals negative 2. Subtract 4. X equals negative 6, which again, that's my second answer up here. So as you can see, even if it's factorable, we can use completing the square. So you guys pick. Maybe one method will work better for you. Go ahead and write your summary and then do your practice for this section.